Hello, my name is Simon and welcome to AFC Bournemouth Analysis. A whole season has passed without me posting a video and I'm really sorry about that, but considering the campaign I don't think it's too much of a surprise. But basically, yeah, we're relegated. Very sad obviously, but ultimately there are reasons for everything, apart from maybe Steve McLaren's haircut, but that's another matter entirely. But yeah, obviously there are huge factors at play. Eddie Howe, the manager, has to take part of the blame, but I think the players definitely aren't innocent. But basically, instead of just rambling on for like 20 minutes, which I could do about this season quite easily, I'll give 10 reasons why I think this season has just completely failed to pan out in the way that I think we all thought it might do, or at least we hoped it would do. So number one, and I think I'm going to try and order these into what I think is probably the most important. I think number one is our change of ethos. We got promoted scoring, I think it was 98 goals in 46 games, so over 2 goals a game, free scoring across midfield. Our strikers were, prolific. They worked well together. But basically, we pressed high up the pitch. We, just attacked teams and tried to outscore them, which worked, worked amazingly in the Championship. In the Premier League, initially we came a bit unstuck, but we managed to adapt and still surprise teams. Second and third season, we still managed to do that, adding in players like Jack Wilshere with even more attacking ability. But then at the start of not this season gone, but the one before, we made a notable shift to a more counter-attacking team. And initially it worked amazing. Amazing? It's not, but you know what I mean. It worked really well. We got 20 points out of the first 30 available. Fraser, Wilson, David Brooks really ripped teams apart on the break. King, obviously. But then teams kind of worked it out, and the season fizzled out. And then we stuck with that style, even though it clearly wasn't working at the end of the previous season, apart from the notable Chelsea result, which is a complete outlier compared to all the other results around it. I mean, literally a few days after that, we lost to Cardiff 2-0 in one of the worst displays of the previous season, but let's not go too far back in time. Basically, yeah, we changed our whole style of... we basically changed why we were successful. And the reason was obviously to be more tight at the back, but it hasn't worked. Which I'll get on to point number 2, which is our inability to defend. And most teams that get relegated can't defend very well. In fact, very few can. Middlesbrough didn't concede many goals when they got relegated 2-3 years ago, but they couldn't score goals. And that's the problem. We've changed from being an attacking team to one that just doesn't score that many. I think we scored the most goals from set pieces, showing a team that really lacks fluency in attack. And yeah, as I said, we weren't an effective side because we couldn't counter-attack particularly well, and our defence couldn't hold out in games, so we were losing more games than we weren't even holding on to points. We've conceded over 60 goals in 5 consecutive seasons. Eventually that's going to catch up with you. It might not have if we kept with our attacking philosophy, but obviously we didn't, so that's where we are. But just our defenders, I don't think individually are that bad. Nathan Ake is, I think, he's going to go to a club like Man City, and if he gets the chance, he will shine because he is a great defender. Adam Smith's a pretty good fullback. Charlie Daniels was good, obviously not now, but I think Rico is a pretty solid fullback. Players like Mepham, Steve Cook, they're solid enough centre backs, but just they just make stupid mistakes. Just not getting rid of the ball. Obviously we have a philosophy of trying to pass it out from the back, but there are times to play it out, and then there are times when not to. But even then, there are stupid mistakes being made. But a lot of pressure was put on our defence, and obviously it wasn't good enough to hold out. Reason number 3, and this is possibly the biggest. I don't know. I consider it a massive one. Eddie Howe's inability to move away from the 4-4-2 formation. So basically, this whole season has been Eddie Howe constantly attempting to play 4-4-2 when it clearly doesn't work. Obviously we've got a few results from it, but I think that's purely down to the player's application rather than the formation. Obviously it's easy to say these things, but a game like Leicester was the most stark reminder of it, when at half time, first half we were completely outplayed, trying to play 4-4-2. The strikers weren't getting any service because the midfield was outnumbered. Suddenly we put 5 in midfield, including Brooks behind the striker, and suddenly we're playing right through the teams as we should. Looking, like there's so many players, it looks like we have 5 extra players when we're moving forward. They're all supported, but also defensively we look better. Basically, we were constantly trying to play 2 in the middle when it just didn't suit the players we had. And it just didn't make any sense, and he kept trying to do it. Like after the Leicester game, he played 4-5-1 against Man City. We played really well, lost, but we pushed them really close, and really we should have got a point in that game, and that would have seen us safe, but that's another story. But basically, then the game straight after that against Southampton, he put 4-4-2. I don't really understand why. Obviously we were at home and he thought we needed to attack, but we needed the points more than he needed to hold on to this formation that clearly doesn't work anymore, especially with some of the players we've got. They just don't suit that formation, which brings me on to number 4, a lack of players who cared. I think it's a bit harsh to say all of the, I think a few players maybe weren't particularly invested. Obviously Harry Wilson got a lot of criticism, and rightly so. I think the second half of this season in particular, he's been just incredibly poor defensively. He's not a winger, but even so, Brooks isn't really a proper winger. He's more better number 10, which I'll get onto. But you just see this player, and he doesn't bother tracking back. But David Brooks tracks back, and he's a much better player than Harry Wilson in my view. But yeah, a player like Harry Wilson. Then you've got the obvious Ryan Fraser debacle, which you can argue with. Obviously players aren't trying sometimes at high levels, and it's a disgrace considering the amount they're paid. But when Ryan Fraser came out and said he wasn't really trying, it's not really what you want to hear any footballer say. He should just have got on with it. But Ryan Fraser obviously leaving before the season was over. I can't blame him for purely a logical and financial standpoint, but it showed that we've built up. We got promoted with a player, lower league players that really wanted it. And we've ended up with players that don't care so much. Like Philip Billing, I think, has been a good player for us overall, but there's been some games where he's just not turned up. Solanke isn't a hungry young player. He's just a player that's coasted through Liverpool's academy, and all of a sudden he has to play these matches against professional men, and he can't cope. I think we really lacked a lot of players with that real fight and desire, and that's a key reason why we didn't stay up. Number 5, Eddie Howe again to blame for playing favourites. Callum Wilson being played constantly this season was baffling, considering there are players that behind him in the pecking order that looked much hungrier and up for the fight more than he was. But yeah, he's done that in the past in past seasons with Simon Francis, Charlie Daniels being past their sell-by date. But this season he didn't do it so much, but it was still notable that we had certain players that shouldn't have been being shoehorned in. You had Adam Smith being played on the other side of the defence when that's not his preferred position, just so he could shoehorn in Jack Stacey and bafflingly leave Rico out, despite the fact that Rico has been one of our better players this season. But yeah, he's done that a bit too much this season. It's not been his main issue. I think that goes down to the 4-4-2, but I think he's still been a bit too stubborn in his selections sometimes. Which brings me on to number 6, Josh King, which I think he's deserving of his entire position in this list, because I'm still really gutted that he's almost certainly going to leave this summer, and it just makes me really, really gutted, because I just don't think Josh King, in the years he's been here, 5 years, we just haven't utilised him properly. We've utilised him maybe across the 5 seasons properly for about maybe 2 seasons of those 5. He was a huge reason in us staying up in our first ever season in the Premier League when he led the line on his own, and then he obviously had that amazing second half of the season a couple of years back where he scored 15 goals, but he's just never had that opportunity to lead the line for us consistently. It's always been Callum Wilson, and that to me has been a huge disappointment. Obviously the last 5 years have been great, being in the top flight, but Josh King, I feel like he's going to make a move, and he's going to be a really big player for someone. And number 7, this kind of links into the formation. We have no plan B. Basically, if a game was going wrong this season, and even most of last season, we didn't seem to know how to turn it around. which is a stark contrast to the season before, where I think we made the most points from losing positions. This season, I think there was a stat before the Leicester game where we hadn't got a single point when we'd fallen behind, or we'd never won from falling behind. So, you know, it just showed that, linking into the no fight point as well, we just didn't seem to know what to do to change it around. There was very few games where you felt, where we were losing and you felt like we were going to turn it around. When we went down this season, like the Newcastle game. That game was, you know, we just let it completely go. We had no idea how to turn the tide in that game. It was 90 minutes of pure pain. And yeah, so I think sometimes we've been very guilty of A, not having a plan B, but B, even if we did, we didn't utilise it properly. Number 8, the number 10 role, which I did mention. We just haven't this season learnt that we play better with a proper number 10 behind a single striker. We just didn't figure that out, and I don't know how, because we literally have 2 players that can play number 10, David Brooks and Harry Wilson. And Harry Wilson has been much maligned, but even his biggest detractors would say that he'd probably look better behind the striker, trying to play the balls through rather than having defensive duties on the wing. You know, we've got 2 really talented, you know, Welsh number 10s right there that we could play, and we just don't. So I don't know why we haven't done that. I think he tried to play Solanke as the deep lying one. He's tried to play King, but these players are strikers. They're not number 10s, and you know, we've just never been able to sort that. And I feel like if we'd played the whole season with even Harry Wilson in the number 10 role and seen how he got on, we never really gave him that role. We would have done better, but obviously it's easier said than done. Number 9, I think a lot of people would say this is a major one for us looking in, but I don't want to make too many excuses, even though this list isn't excuses, it's merely reasons I think we've gone down. Number 9 is injuries. You know, I think most of our squad has been injured, apart from maybe the goalkeeper, at some point this season. Like, they've either been out for a week or, you know, several months. You know, and there have been big players like Nathan Ake missed a week or 2 injury. But then we've had David Brooks out for what would have been the whole season until the pandemic, and he's never really been able to get fully up to speed. Stanislas missing was obviously a huge miss, considering how he affected our games after lockdown. He was was probably our best performer after lockdown. So yeah, I think our injuries have really affected this season in a way. But I think all the points before that, especially our inability to play a formation that suits the players that we have, has been our biggest issue. We've had the players, even when we've not had injuries, to be safe this season. We just haven't done it. Number 10 is a bit more of an outsider one, and will also tie into a general point I've got at the end. Is I don't think we've had enough outside voices talking to Eddie Howe. I think he's filled his backroom staff with players, or ex-players, or friends. Obviously Tyndall, he's played with. Neil Moss, the goalkeeping staff, Stephen Purchase, players, you know, people like this who clearly love Bournemouth, and Steve Fletcher, who love Bournemouth as a club. But are they going to offer Eddie Howe really? Are they going to challenge the way he's thinking? Are they going to tell him that maybe he should try this, or maybe just point out to him that 4-4-2 isn't working? Just something like that would be useful. I just feel like Eddie Howe is on his own, in his own bubble, and you know, that was all well and good when it was going well. You know, the bubble, this is a terrible metaphor, I'm not going to make that one. It's all fine when it's all working well, but when it isn't, you need that outside voice just to tell you, you know, just to give you an idea of maybe where you're going wrong. And I just feel like he has lacked that. And I really hope, I'm done with the 10 points now, but just in summary, I think Eddie Howe should definitely stay. I will be devastated if he leaves. This relegation hasn't hurt as much as previous ones that I've experienced, like the very first one when I was supporting Bournemouth, and we lost. We got lost at Wrexham, got relegated to what was Division 3 then, I think. And then obviously I was at Carlisle on the last day several years ago now, and that hurt a lot more than this one. I think maybe because in those days you had players that really had to fight for the team. You know, they weren't being paid massive wages, they weren't mini celebrities. But I think this relegation hasn't hurt as much because I feel like it's been of our own creation. I think if we'd gone down in our first ever season in the Premier League, fighting and playing attacking football, it would have really hurt, because we gave it such a good shot. But this season, I just feel like we just haven't clicked at all. And I don't want to detract from Aston Villa's achievement. I think they've done really well, especially in the final few games. The Arsenal game, they battled their hearts out to get that result, which ultimately kept them up. But I feel like on our day, we can play better football than most of the bottom half of the Premier League. So I think something's really gone badly wrong, and I hope I've covered it in those 10 points. But it's just really disappointing. But I hope Eddie Howe saw enough in that Everton result on the final day to keep him at the club. And I hope if he does stay, he decides to get a bit more of an outside influence and stay and rebuild, because I think we have got exciting players. I think Solanke won't be a joke in the Championship. I think he was coming into his own in the Premier League, so I think he'll be a big player in the Championship. I think Surridge will, he's scored goals for Swansea in the Championship, he's proven. I think Billing will be a massive player, both physically and just as a player in the Championship if he stays. Lewis Cook might eventually come good if he stays. Gosling will be a great player in the Championship. Then you've got, the players at the back. You've got exciting fullbacks like Stacey, Adam Smith might stay. You've got Mepham, young centre-backs, Mepham, Lloyd Kelly, Simpson, and then Steve Cook as the experienced head. You've got Ramsdale in goal. You've got all these young, exciting players for us to really make a good go at the Championship, especially when you look at the teams in there. I don't think many of them will be able to strengthen because of the lockdown, whereas we'll have parachute payments. So ultimately, I hope Eddie Howe does stay, but I think this season has been pretty much a disaster, really. There's been very few spurts of good form. One good result has been followed up by many disappointing ones. I think there's been massive moments across the season, but the big one where I think which has relegated us is those 4 games during Christmas where we lost to West Ham 4-0, Brighton 2-0, Watford 3-0, lost to Norwich 1-0. Just not scoring a goal in those games, I think, showed you that we'd lost our identity, we'd lost our spirit, we'd lost everything that made us worthy of being in the Premier League. So we rightly lost our status as a Premier League club. But hopefully, with these young players that we've got, we can rebuild and be worthy of being in the top flight again. But we'll see. But anyway, thanks so much for watching. This went on for much longer than I expected. But thanks so much for watching, and up the cherries in all departments.